Let's get to a piece that I wrote on TexasFootball.com. We're doing the Texas high school ball inside the numbers throughout the course of the offseason. We're going to take a look at the data that makes up Texas high school football, try to figure out what it means looking back and looking forward. We take a look at the best defenses
We did the offense
in Texas high school football in 2019. Yeah. Last week, whenever I put out the best offenses, everyone was like, do the defenses! And I'm like, guys.
It's like, no, that was it.
We're just doing that.
We do not like focusing on defenses here. We don't do that.
While we are football analysts,
Yeah.
we literally only look at offense.
That's
what
it.
we do.
That's all that matters.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Whoever said
Thanks for the
defense
idea.
reminded us. Oh, my gosh. We should do the other side of the ball.
Oh, weird.
Never once thought about that.
So we crunched the numbers. Take a look at the best defenses in Texas high school football. The thing that surprised me in looking at this is whereas there were no state finalists in whenever you looked at the top 10 offenses, there were 2 state finalists, and including 1 state champion, in the top 10 defenses. So if you want to say defense wins championships, well, here you go. There is some
big defensive fans.
there is some I'm trying to think of the last time that a team with like an average defense won a title. You know what I mean? It seems like every team we see has like a legit good defense.
I'll say 2017 Highland Park.
I was just thinking that. 2017 Highland Park, that defense was fine.
They did enough.
But they outscored. They were relying. They were relying on outscoring
they had to
people.
Go out there and do.
You know
I'm gonna look back on that.
They were relying on outscoring people. That's interesting. So we took a look. We crunched the numbers. This goes by points against per game, and I know, right, that teams can score in ways that do not go. That it's not the defense's fault, right? Special teams. I understand. Okay.
Do you?
But whenever you have a big data set like this, you can probably just say, like, there's not a team that like gave up 15 punt returns for a touchdown this year and just like, oh, well, that really skewed the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, it skews the numbers a little bit, but probably not so much to affect who's in the top 10, in my opinion. So we took a look at the 10 best defenses in Texas high school football. We start with number 10. One of the state finalists, the Duncanville Panthers, 9.8 points per game. I don't think it's necessarily a surprise to see them on this list. They were wrecking shop. And by the way, I think another thing worth mentioning is that they were, they went up against Rockwall and they held them down. They played some big-time offenses and held them down. I want to say that North Shore was the team that scored the most points against them all year long. Their defense was sensational all year long. Not surprising. They are at they gave up 9.8 points per game. Right ahead of them at number 9, the Lindsay Knights. Do you think that have Duncanville and Lindsay ever been in the same sentence?
No.
Like that's just
Did they have a player named Lindsay?
Yeah, maybe they do.
That would probably the only reason.
But Lindsay gave up just 9.7 points per game all year long in a 9-3 record. Very quietly, excellent year for them. One of the things that ended up kind of standing out to me is that this was a team that when you take a look at the numbers, like I feel like Colt Chuckers, their quarterback, kind of sucked up a lot of the oxygen in the room. Mm-hmm. But this was a defense that really locked people down. And they ran through some very tough teams. Now, they ended up – part of the reason this number – they would have been higher if they hadn't run into Sundown, who was just a murder machine there towards the end, and gave up 45 points to them. But that was the most they gave up all year by a pretty considerable margin. Like, even in their losses, they gave up 24 points to Munster. You know what I mean? So, Lindsay, the number 9 team on this list.
Real fast, someone made a good who was it? Oh, Daniel Agnew made a good point when you talked about the Duncanville one. Southlake Carroll put up 35 on them.
That's right.
That was the most, so
That's
only
right.
by 4 points. But Southlake came back in
but
that
same
game.
thing. So, but again, you would say two
absolutely.
pretty high-powered offenses that had to earn their way there.
Yeah, no doubt.
8th on this list at 9.2 points per game, Alto, the Yellow Jackets. Another very quietly excellent year for them. They had a stretch there in the middle of the season where basically nobody was scoring on them. They were outstanding. They ended up pitching 1, 2, 3, 4 shutouts all year, and then also held Garrison to 7 points. They held Carlisle to 7 points. They held Hawkins to 8 points. I mean, they were a dominant defensive team. Alto, the 8th best defense. The 7th best defense.
This one does not surprise me.
Austin Westlake. Westlake gave up 9 points a game, which is pretty amazing. And that is, again, yeah, Ashley, you mentioned it's not necessarily a surprise to see them on this list because even going into that state championship game, we were saying, okay, this is a team that, yeah, the offense is good. It's good, but this is a team that wins with defense.
Right.
And you saw that. I would make the argument that this was a defense that got better as the season went on, including in the playoffs, where I felt like their defense really stepped up in a big way. Obviously, pitching a shutout in the state championship game is awfully impressive. I know people want to talk about Eli Stowers, but they still shut down what was an unbelievable rushing attack. When you go through it, I mean, in the playoffs, right? In the playoffs, when they are theoretically playing the best teams they will, and they played Lake Travis earlier in the year, lost 26-25. But they gave up 7, 6, 14, 14, 3, and 0 in the playoffs. That's impressive.
And it was just, after watching that in person, just not surprising whatsoever.
And, I mean, look at some of the offenses they went up against. Civil Steel, pretty decent offense. Brennan, pretty decent offense. Weslaco East could score. Yeah. San Antonio Brandeis, right? Jordan Battles and company. Katie Taylor was maybe a little bit overmatched in the semifinal, but then Geyer is obviously a big offense as well. So, Austin Westlake, something less.
And it's really been cool how Dodge is kind of, I mean, obviously Coach Salazar has been a big part of that, but we're used to seeing Coach Dodge with, offenses, high-flying offenses from South Lake Carroll and quarterback play and all that. And Westlake really, outside of Ellinger, really has been a defensive,
juggernaut.
Power. Yeah, basically for all of his tenure. It's been impressive because even when you consider Westlake, like we think of quarterbacks, and we think of Westlake, and now it's like, well, not really. Now we're thinking of games being played inside of a phone booth and them beating you if they can score 20 points.
And that was really big for them all season just because of them playing the three quarterbacks.
They
had to
they have
something.
One constant.
One consistent.
It was impressive. So the next three on this list all round to 8.5 points per game, but there are decimal points, which is why this is like I didn't want to muck it up. Sixth on the list is Rawls, the Jackrabbits. Here is the one stat you need to know about Rawls. They played 12 games, and in 9 of those, the team that they played did not crack double digits. That's impressive. The Jackrabbits were really, really solid this year, gave up 103 points all year long. They are number 6 on the list. Number 5, go to the ATX. How about Austin LBJ? Kind of under the radar, outstanding season defensively for LBJ, but they were really, really solid all year long from a defensive perspective. Again, it rounds to 8.5 points per game. But this was a defense that was absolutely wrecking people. 8-3. One of the big. They have just 94 points all year long. One of the big problems was that, like, you go back to. I think this is very telling about Austin LBJ. Week 3 they played La Vega, right?
Yeah.
Now it's a 5A versus a 4A, but still they're playing La Vega, very good La Vega team. They hold La Vega to 21 points. Right? They held La Vega. Carthage couldn't do that. They held La Vega to 21 points. But the problem is they could only score 7. Like, they lost to Dripping Springs 17-14. They lost their playoff game to Georgetown 6-3. Like, their defense was sensational all year long. Just offense never could get it going against those solid squads. So they are number 5 on the list. Number 4, feels like we can pencil these guys in every year, is East Bernard. East Bernard's defense. And this, a good conversation to have about them is East Bernard's defense was outstanding all year long. They gave up, 8.5 points per game. They held pretty much everybody to their lowest point total of the year. Even in their loss, they played Paul Pewitt. We saw how explosive that offense could be. They lost 24-18. This was a team, though, but I also feel like this is a reflection of how that an offense can feed a defense, right? If the rest of these teams, you're going to look at them and you're going to be like, oh, these are running teams. They are teams that keep the clock moving, keep their defense fresh, and I think that was a big part. East Bernard's defense, obviously exceptional. Gave up 8.5 points a game when they were on the field. But I think that the offense helps to feed that as well because, as we'll go into, number 3, we're now in the top 3, is Cy-Fair. Cy-Fair has a very obvious identity. We're going to run the ball. We're going to play great defense. Well, they did that this year. Gave up 8 points a game. Their defense was excellent. This is a vintage Cy-Fair squad. The defense was outstanding. They're the 3rd best defense in the state from a numbers perspective. But again, it's one of those things that the offense helps to feed the defense because it keeps it fresh.
Right.
Same goes for number 2.
Do it.
It's San Saba. The Armadillos! San Saba gave up 7 points a game. And even you go back to their playoff loss to Valley View, they lost 14-12. This is a defense that was wrecking people. And I think if you were to go and do the margin of victory, I think they have the largest margin. In fact, I can look that up real quick. I think they have the largest margin of victory all year long. But their defense was outstanding. I think that when you talk about, remember Coach Jared Feacock left, they promoted their defense coordinator Andreas Aguirre, and I think that was a move, knowing that how good their defense had a chance to be. Obviously, paid off there. And yeah, San Saba had the largest margin of victory of any team in the state. They won their games by an average of 46 points. Jeez. And a lot of that is the fact they gave up 98 points all year long in 14 games.
An average.
But here's what's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay? As good as those teams were, like the gap between look at this. The gap between San Saba at number 2.
Yeah.
And Westlake, right?
Yeah.
That's 2 points.
2 points. That's it.
2 points. That's really good. The gap between number 2 and number 1 is almost 2 points.
Yeah.
The number 1 best defense in the state this year was Diboll. The Lumberjacks
5.2
gave up 5.2 points per game.
That's insane.
5.2 points per game is insane. Okay. It helped lead them to their second undefeated regular season in program history. They had, and really started with the front 7, the Gums brothers, Hayden McElroy, Chase Tamez. Their defense was unbelievable, but their secondary was also very good. They put 4 guys on the first team all-district team.
Wow.
From the secondary.
It's not surprising when you look at that number, but
yeah. But this was they pitched 5 shutouts. It's technically 6. Because Buna scored a safety, right? It's technically 6, but it goes in the books as 7. And more importantly, they played 12 games. 10 of them they held to single-digit point totals. Like, Diboll's defense was something serious. And from a numbers perspective, they had the best defense in Texas high school football in 2019. You can see my piece at TexasFootball.com about the top 10 defenses in Texas high school ball in 2019. Next week, I need to figure out what I'm doing for Inside the Numbers. Stay tuned to this space.